Okay, so my name's Karen Maynard. I'm the public education supervisor for our solid waste department and the solid waste management district. And Diane Boone is also on the call with me. She's our public education coordinator. So we are going to talk about food waste reduction today. And every time I do one of these, there's so much information I want to share. So I just kind of pick and choose what I think is most helpful for you all, but there's more. So we'll go ahead and get started here. So first of all, there is a website, savethefood.com, that has a lot of great information on it. And so I have some facts that I want to share. And so across the entire food production chain, supply chain, up to 40% of all food in the U.S. gets eaten. And that's a lot of money lost. So this can happen on all sorts of levels. This can be at the production level. For example, if the farmer doesn't have enough labor to harvest an entire crop, retailers sometimes turning away ugly produce, which we'll talk about that later. Transportation, sometimes items getting hauled up in customs and spoiled. And then retailers possibly ordering more food. More food than they even need because they don't want their store to look picked over. Those are just some examples. But as this next fact is, from the fridge, more food waste is actually wasted in our homes than the part of the supply chain. So, although there's a lot that can be done at different levels throughout the supply chain, for us today, I will be focusing a lot on our individual behaviors that we can change. And just another fact here, across the supply chain, an average of 1,250 calories a day is wasted for every American, which is 400 pounds wasted a year per person. So that's kind of a lot. And then each year, the average family of four wastes an average of 1,000 pounds of food at home, $1,500. So that can definitely be hard to hear if you can kind of imagine everybody has wasted food inadvertently, or, something has gone bad or gotten hidden in the refrigerator. So it is in lots of ways. So we're going to talk about that. And then also just knowing that a lot of people have trouble putting food on the table. So knowing how much is wasted and then how many people go hungry, that can be hard to process as well. So like I said, we'll talk more on this. We'll talk a lot about some tips to help you as just a member of our community trying to avoid food waste. So here's a chart. I use this chart quite a bit for different presentations. This is from our solid waste study that was done a few years ago. They're very expensive to do, so it's not something we're going to do every year or anything like that. It's a very in-depth study of our waste stream here in Louisville. And so this is showing the top 10 materials that went to the landfill. And through that process, they calculated that about 88,000 tons of food waste in our landfill and going to the landfill every year here in Louisville. So again, and that's our top material that's going to the landfill. And of course, when food gets into the landfill, it rots and produces methane, which is a greenhouse gas that's even more potent than carbon dioxide. So as we talk about food waste, Diane, you said how much? 4 times more? Is that what you said? Or okay. So when we talk about food waste, it is we're also talking about helping to reduce climate change. So we'll get into that a little bit more too as we go on. This shows the food recovery hierarchy. So as with pretty much any topic that I end up sharing about or presenting about, reducing waste is always number one. So that goes for food as well. So if you can figure out a way to reduce that that food before it even becomes waste, that's the idea. And then down to donating food, feeding food to animals, and then composting the food. And then landfill is going to be the least preferred choice for food waste. I did want to refer to or talk a little bit about COVID-19 impacts that we've seen. In general, when the pandemic hit, there was kind of a surge, an increase of food waste, and just everything kind of, got out of whack. So there was definitely some major bad things going on as far as food waste. But since then, it's evened out a little bit, and some of the things that can be good for restaurants in particular, buffets are a major contributor to food waste in restaurants. So because of the sanitation factor for buffets, a lot of those have gone away, and we're, even if they do come back someday, it'd probably take a while. So that helps. Also, restaurants are having to reduce the amount of things on their menus, not really knowing how much people are going to actually order. So by doing that, they're also wasting less. In households, we've seen there's more planning going on because you might have to order groceries online. So it just kind of automatically makes you have to plan a little bit better, which we're going to talk about smart planning. Also knowing that maybe you don't want to go to the grocery every day just to grab a little something. You might find yourself stretching food a little further. And also kind of anecdotally, there's been an increase in at least interest, we know, but in gardening, in composting, and cooking. So we know from our compost presentations that we've done and the compost sale that it's been pretty on people's minds here in Louisville as far as the compost bin. Now, I did reach out to Dare to Care, asking if they had any, and they have a nice website, first of all, if you, for whatever reason, have food that you want to donate just as a nice gesture, or if you have over too much food that you are able to donate. Their website is very nice. They did say, when I asked, that if you choose to call to ask any questions, to be sure and leave a voicemail, because they do answer their back. And also, if you, there's only a couple locations for food on that website, but then the Need Food website has other locations. For one, if you need food, you can do that too, but they will accept donations there also. They just can't store as much. So if it's a large amount, maybe not, but so you can look at the map, and if it seems a little bit more convenient for donations, you can look at that Need Food website as well. So that's an option. Also, if anybody else likes to follow neighborhood pages on social media, next door, I like to follow the Louisville Freegans Facebook page. Sometimes people do give away items. Maybe they bought in bulk something and decided that, like they didn't like it, so they don't want to just throw it away, or maybe something's about to expire and they are, somebody might offer it for free. So everybody loves free stuff. So I talk about that all the time. For anything that you are deciding to throw away, you might be able to give it away for free. I know right now with our, we're in this pandemic, and if there's any concerns over sanitation as far as giving things away, that's understandable, but just always keep that in mind of giving things away. So I came across, well, there's these 5 myths like I said, SaveTheFood.com has some great information. And so looking through some information, I found these 5 popular myths that might make you throw some things away. And we're going to go through those right now. All right, one myth is that you might get food poisoning from eating old food. So food-related illnesses can almost always be tracked back to some type of bacteria or microbes, so which is totally different. And although food poisoning is no joke, you're probably not going to get it from eating old food. So keep that in mind. Another myth is that discolored or wilted greens are beyond saving. So it's not necessarily a food safety concern. And then it gives us a tip that if you have some greens that are kind of limp, that they have gotten a little old, you can soak your sad greens in ice water, and through the process of osmosis, they will perk back up for a better crunch. And another myth is that crisper drawers are a marketing ploy. So some great refrigerator features nowadays, but in a lot of ways, they are great and actually do help with keeping your food fresh. So understanding how a refrigerator, how all the parts kind of work is important. So for instance, as heat rises, so the warmer areas are at the top. So maybe putting some low risk items up there, and then things that you that might actually have a risk of foodborne illness, keep them toward the bottom where it's colder. Crisper drawers are good for the produce. And then, yes, thanks, Wanda. This is good for Thanksgiving leftovers. If you still end up cooking a lot of food, make sure you use these tips for that. And then the door, the refrigerator, might have heard before, is not the coldest. So condiments are best kept there, maybe not so much from milk and stuff. Another myth is that pretty produce is better than ugly produce. And, you know, you can always cut bruises off of produce if you think the taste or texture won't be good. But little scars and scabs on little rough patches on things, you don't really have to cut that off. It doesn't really do anything when it's something like you. And then, of course, our system requires food to have dates on them. So there's sell-by dates and use before and best-by dates, and they are guidelines for freshness, but really don't have anything to do with food safety. So, you know, this is a time when you can use your senses and probably determine if something isn't that good to eat. So, you know, if it smells okay, it probably is. The other thing that I'll talk about is smart planning. And so, like I said, this pandemic maybe in some ways has gotten some of us into planning our meals a little bit better. Sometimes, you know, some weeks I'm terrible at it. Some weeks I do good. So, you know, it's always good to have some tips about that. So one thing is to start by looking in your refrigerator and just sort of look and see what actually needs to be used up, and then think of a meal that you can make with those items. So even if you're on your way to the grocery, kind of looking and seeing what you can still use and planning those meals out. And if you have produce that you think isn't going to make it and you're not going to be able to eat it, there's ways to freeze things. You can blanch and freeze some vegetables, things like that. So kind of, or fruit, you know, sometimes you can freeze fruit, but use them later in other recipes, smoothies, things like that. So lots of ways to use what's in your refrigerator. This is a little tip. I don't think I've ever actually done it, but I liked the idea to take a shelfie of your fridge or your pantry shelves before you go to the grocery, and then you can kind of refer to it if you forget. Did I still have that in there? you can refer to the picture. That's kind of fun. Another thing is to kind of just keep some essentials, kind of know what things you can make multiple meals out of, some of your essentials. So certain grains or spices or sauces that don't necessarily go bad, you can kind of keep those on hand. So that way, if you end up with some produce you want to use up, you still have some of those essentials that can go with it. And kind of using building blocks through the week as you plan. You can pick some protein, a couple of grains, and some vegetables, and then kind of build on that for the week. And so an example would be if you have broccoli and peppers, you could saute those as a side one night, put in enchiladas another night, and then add to a soup another night. So so you can kind of use the same things and put it together in different ways so you don't get bored of the same food. And another thing, which I need to be better about this too, is actually planning for those lazy nights that you don't end up wanting to cook because, you know, you might buy food thinking you were going to make a meal, but then end up getting takeout instead. So something might go bad in that time period. So actually just factor those in. You know, if you know you like to get takeout 1 or 2 nights a week, then just plan for that and don't buy too much food. Keeping frozen vegetables on hand to fill in the gaps can also be very helpful. So, you know, when you do have something you need to use up, but you think you don't have a side or something to kind of go with it, having some frozen vegetables is great. And then that's not going to go bad, you know, while you wait to use it. And, you know, if you cook more accidentally than you need, or you just plan to cook more than you need because your ingredients came with too much, just plan to have a second dish and freeze it for later. And that in the future, or when you forgot to plan, or you know, you just plan for an easy night where you actually just pull it out of the freezer to eat for another meal. So as far as the Save the Food website that I mentioned, this page, it's going to be savethefood.com/storage, is actually really helpful too. I know over time in my life of cooking and maybe trying out new ingredients, I have had to learn certain ways of how to store food, fresh produce. My example in learning might be cilantro and parsley. When I looked it up finally and realized that I was supposed to be putting those in a jar of water like flowers and covering with a plastic bag to kind of hold in the moisture and putting it in the fridge that way. So understanding how to properly store food is very important, especially for your produce if you want to make it last. And as I noticed on this website that if you can add this skill. So if anybody else, like our family, has Echo Dots, and we like to use that for different things, you can actually ask. You have to get on your Amazon web the Alexa skill, but then you can say something like, ask Save the Food how to store asparagus, which I tried earlier on mine, and she just kind of spouted out exactly what I needed to do if I were trying to store asparagus. So that was a great thing to learn, that, you know, we like to, I know not everybody likes the Echo Dots, but we do. We kind of like having our little digital assistants. This is another website that I haven't really used myself, but I came across eatortoss.com. So you can search certain foods or look through the list and see some possible, you can kind of see in the picture there, but some possible issues that food might have. And it can give you a little more information on whether or not it's safe to eat or if you should toss it. And another website and app that I think Diane shared with me that I have not used, but supercook.com, is going to be something where you can put in all the ingredients that you might have on hand, and then it finds recipes that you could use to cook with that. So that's a great option if you're just trying to use up the things that are in your refrigerator or your pantry. The Guesstimator is a really neat tool. Now, I know what's going on right now is that we're not having these large parties. So this might be a tool that you choose to use later, but it's kind of fun to play with and figure out how it works. So it's at savethefood.com. It's called the Guesstimator. And I took some screenshots. So basically, you would put in how many people you were expecting, and you can see you can put in small eaters, average eaters, and big eaters because it'll factor that in. And then you can actually plan for leftovers. So that, because for a holiday like Thanksgiving, I know we all love to eat Thanksgiving leftovers. So that would definitely be a time to factor that in. And then you can give it more information about what kind of meal you're having and add certain items. And it looks a little complicated at first, but you can just kind of pick your items and it's going to tell you how much you would need to feed the number of people that you had. So I know when you do have dinner parties, the worst thing would be to run out of food, right? So this will help you plan without over buying and less overspending as well, especially if things aren't going to keep. And as I mentioned before, backyard composting has become, at least over in the spring and summer, we noticed a lot of people were wanting more information and purchasing compost bins that we have. So as part of that solid waste study, we know that out of everything that we put in our local landfill, 26% could have been composted. Now that's not all food waste, of course, but a lot of it is, as we saw. So if you go to our website, louisvilleky.gov, we do have a page on our Public Works site about composting. So, and on there's some information about how to go about purchasing one of our compost bins if you don't do thing yet and you think you might want to. We offer, we have some Earth Machine compost bins for sale that are at our office. So you would purchase it online and then come pick it up at our office. So, although composting was kind of low food waste hierarchy that we showed you, it's still a great option, especially as an individual. So you can learn more about that if you want. And we did a webinar on it, and that's on the site as well if you want to watch that. So the other thing is sometimes people don't live in a place where you can compost, or maybe it's just not something you're interested in doing. But we do have a local business that does a compost co-op. So, I haven't reached out to them in the past few months, but, hope they're doing okay as a small business. But I believe it's $20 per month, and they give you those 5-gallon buckets, and you have a day where you set it out and they come take it and then they give you a new bucket. And it's a way that you can compost without having to keep your own pile. And it's composted over near U of L. So it's kind of in conjunction with the U of L composting that goes on there. LouisvilleCompost.com. So if you're interested, check that out. Now, the RDC is the Natural Resources Defense Council, and they're the ones that have kind of come up with the Save Food campaign, which has its whole other website. So the NRDC website also has a lot of information. And so it's a great resource if you want to keep learning. And this chart here shows some of the impacts of food waste, especially with climate change and everything going on. You can kind of see just by looking at those numbers, how much, especially Americans, are wasting on food. So there's another organization that is called Project Drawdown, and they have a website that shows 76 solutions to greenhouse gas emissions, and reducing food waste actually the number one. So out of all 76 solutions on their page, it's the one that would have the biggest impact. And the great thing about that is it's actually doable. You know, there's some large scale things that can happen on several levels, but there's also lots of individual ways that you can be part of that. So, you know, when we hear about climate change, and sometimes we wonder, you know, what can I do just as a one person? But reduce food waste is actually something major that you can do to help combat that. And so, as I mentioned, the NRDC has this Save the Food campaign. And so I've kind of sprinkled some of their ads there throughout the presentation. But my favorite thing is just that on all of the food items shown, it's best if used. So it's not best if used by anything. It's just best if you use your food. So it's a pretty neat campaign they have going. And those pictures are available on their website. So if you're just interested in sharing, you can always use your own social media to share some of that too. And another thing that Diane mentioned is Imperfect Foods. And so I don't know if Diane wants to share anything about her experience with that, because I think that she has subscribed to Imperfect Foods. I have not, but they have a great mission about reducing food waste. Do you want to share anything, Diane?
Sure. It's food that is not pretty enough, is not able to walk the catwalk for the grocery shelves. It's apples that are smaller. It's, let's see, what else was I thinking? It's those bruises, lemons that might have bruises or scars on them. Oh my gosh, you would think that the scars and on peels and things is a heinous crime, but actually that little statement was right. It has absolutely no effect on the taste or anything like that. Yeah, it's a weekly delivery. You can suspend it for however long. So usually I do that every other week. And you sign up and you get what you want every week, and you can change it, and they have it here for you. It's really kind of nice. You always have fresh fruits and vegetables that are not going to waste, that you actually saved from going to waste. So it kind of makes you feel good. And actually the proportions are better. Like I said, the fruit is kind of smaller, and it's just what you need. You don't need a huge apple for your lunch, or, you know, it's actually a lot nicer. Anyway, yeah, Mom and I have really enjoyed it. And it's nice not having to go to Kroger for fresh fruits and vegetables.
Great, thank you. I'll have to look into that myself. Again, as I was doing research, I came across this particular podcast episode. I had never listened to Food Talk before. That's what it looks like if you search it on the podcast page or whatever. And then the actual episode listed there is called Food Waste is a Solvable Problem. And it was really interesting. And some of the information I shared today came from that. And some of it, you know, when you start researching some of these, you'll see a lot of the same organizations popping up and the same people presenting and sharing and being quoted. So there's some great work being done out there. And so if you're interested in learning more, and you're the type of person that likes to listen to podcasts, maybe while you do something else, that's a great option. It was about 25 minutes long. And this is just kind of the end to show you that your efforts do count. So as mentioned before, food waste is a major problem and contributor to climate change. So every little thing actually does count. And so some things that you can do is keep learning I've just kind of briefly glossed over the surface here, and there's tons of articles and statistics and things that you can read, and then just do your best, you know. Same with any kind of reducing waste or recycling or anything, just kind of do what you can. And making small changes, they really add up. So I know with kids, it can kind of be hard to change food habits and different things. So, you know, just start small and keep adding to it, and it adds up. And if you do find yourself tossing food into the compost pile or even into the garbage can, just learn from it. Think about that later. Maybe you know now, oh, my kids aren't going to eat that many grapes like I thought they would or whatever. So try not to feel too guilty about it, and just learn from that, and you know, use that information for later. And then the goal is to improve. You don't have to be perfect. So sometimes we need to hear that. All right, so that's all I've got. I hope that that information was helpful to you all, and I am going to pull up the little chats again, because I know maybe some things came up and I want to make sure I don't miss anything. So let's see. There's a shout out to Glean, Kentucky, that harvests imperfect food and food waste in central Kentucky. Gleankentucky.org. So I wasn't familiar with that. I'll have to check it out. Thank you, Wanda. And let's see. Here's a question. I have an issue with composting foods containing seeds. The seeds tend to sprout when I use the compost in my garden, and I have to pull the seedlings up. Is there another option for using foods containing seeds without throwing them in the trash? If it's a particular food item, I mean, a lot of those websites, you know, that they have some tools on maybe trying to use all the food in finding recipes. So I would maybe check that first if there's a particular type of produce you buy that has seeds. But other than that, I'm not really sure. I know in the garden, you know, with weeds that you don't want to sprout, you can use the yard waste service and just make, you know, I don't always put everything in my compost from pulling weeds and stuff because I know it doesn't get hot enough to kill it. So maybe if it's not, you can kind of toss it.
Baking the seeds in the oven. You could try baking the seeds. But when I feed my worms melon, I get little baby sprouts, and I just pull them up and the worms eat them. So it's not going to hurt anything to have them, and it's not going to hurt anything to pull them up. They just make more compost. So I just keep putting seeds in there, and eventually they eat them.
Yeah. Yeah, it might be if you don't want to have too many weeds to pull in your garden. I understand that too. So there's some options for you. Are there any other questions? We really appreciate everybody getting on the call. And of course, we will share this recording on our website. It'll be on YouTube. So, you know, if it's something that in another conversation you want to share the recording with someone else, feel free. And I'm still watching the chat just in case, but if you all don't have any other questions or anything, thanks for coming.